Title: The Whispering Pines, Inheritance. Chapter 1. The Road Turns Dark. The battered minivan, affectionately nicknamed the Wanderer, rumbled down the narrow, forgotten road. John gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. Beside him, Linda navigated with a tattered map, her brow furrowed in concentration. In the back, Ethan, Bruce, Mary, and Emma were a cacophony of nervous energy and forced cheerfulness. Dawn, silent and withdrawn as usual, stared out the window at the encroaching darkness. "Are you sure this is the right way, Linda?" John asked, his voice tight. The GPS had given up an hour ago, swallowed by the dense, unrelenting forest that pressed in on either side. "Pretty sure," Linda replied, though her hesitation was palpable. "The map says we should be there in another hour. It's supposed to be just off the main this road." There was a sprawling, dilapidated mansion inherited by Ethan from a distant relative no one had ever met. The promise of a free weekend getaway, fueled by cheap beer and ghost stories, had seemed appealing a week ago. Now, as twilight bled into an oppressive darkness, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, the mood had soured. Bruce, ever the joker, tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe it's haunted. Think of the Instagram likes." Mary rolled her eyes. "Very funny, Bruce. I bet it's just a dusty old house with cobwebs the size of your head." But even Mary's attempt at normalcy couldn't dispel the growing unease. The forest seemed to be watching them, its ancient trees like gnarled, silent sentinels. The road grew steadily worse, becoming little more than a rutted track. Finally, Linda pointed. "There, I think that's the driveway." A barely discernible opening in the trees led to an overgrown path. John cautiously steered the Wanderer onto it, the branches scraping against the metal. After what felt like an eternity, the trees parted, revealing the mansion. It was worse than any of them had imagined. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Walls. The house loomed against the night sky, a gothic monstrosity of crumbling stone and broken windows. Ivy crawled up its walls like grasping claws. The air was heavy with a sense of neglect, of something deeply wrong. Ethan, despite being the inheritor, seemed the most shaken. "Wow," was all he managed to say. They cautiously approached the front door, its wood warped and cracked. John pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest, and the smell of mildew and decay assaulted them. Inside, the house was a cavernous labyrinth of dusty rooms. Inside, the house was a cavernous labyrinth of dusty rooms and shadowy corners. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting an eerie glow on the decaying furniture and cobweb-draped portraits. Despite the oppressive atmosphere, they began to explore, driven by a mixture of morbid curiosity and a desperate need to find a place to sleep. They located a kitchen, surprisingly intact, and a handful of bedrooms upstairs. As they settled in, a sense of unease settled over them. The house seemed to breathe. They heard creaks and groans that weren't just the settling of old wood. They felt unseen eyes watching them. "I don't like this place," Emma whispered, clutching Mary's arm. "It feels wrong." Later that night, as they sat around a makeshift campfire in the living room, telling stories to try and ignore the growing dread, Dawn suddenly spoke for the first time since they'd arrived. "There's something here," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I can feel it." Everyone stared at him, startled. Dawn was usually so quiet, so detached. "What do you mean, Dawn?" Linda asked, her voice trembling slightly. Dawn didn't answer. He just stared into the darkness beyond the firelight, his eyes wide with a fear no one could understand. Chapter 3. The Spectre Emerges. That night, the nightmares began. Each of them, except Dawn, tossed and turned, plagued by visions of a pale figure lurking in the shadows, its eyes burning with malevolent intent. John was the first to see it clearly. He woke in a cold sweat, convinced he wasn't alone. He saw it standing in the corner of the room, a woman in a tattered white dress, her face obscured by long, dark hair. He blinked, and it was gone. Linda saw it in the hallway, a fleeting glimpse as she went to the bathroom. It turned its head slowly, its eyes fixed on her. It was gone before she could scream. Bruce dismissed it as sleep paralysis, but his bravado was clearly forced. Mary refused to leave Emma's side. Ethan was pale and withdrawn, muttering about the history of the house. The next day, the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The shadows seemed to deepen, the whispers grew louder. They felt a constant, chilling presence, and the feeling of being watched intensified. They tried to leave, but the minivan wouldn't start. The engine sputtered and died, refusing to cooperate. They were trapped. As dusk approached, the terror reached its peak. They huddled together in the living room, the fire burning low, the darkness pressing in on them. Then, it appeared. The woman in white stood in the doorway, her face now visible in the flickering firelight. Her skin was pale and translucent, her eyes black pits of despair. A chilling wail escaped her lips, a sound that seemed to claw at their sanity. Chapter 4. The Fight for Survival. Panic erupted. Bruce screamed and bolted, disappearing into the darkness of the house. Mary and Emma clung to each other, sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan stood frozen, his eyes wide with terror. John, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate need to protect Linda, grabbed a heavy candlestick from the fireplace and stepped forward. "Stay away!" he yelled, his voice trembling. The ghost glided towards him, its eyes fixed on him. It reached out a spectral hand, and a wave of icy cold washed over John. He felt his heart stop, his breath catch in his throat. He swung the candlestick, striking the ghost in the face. It recoiled, its wail turning into a shriek of rage. The room grew colder, the shadows deepened, and the temperature dropped to the point of freezing, as if a door to hell had opened. Linda, seizing the opportunity, grabbed a can of hairspray and a lighter from her bag. She flicked the lighter and sprayed the hairspray, creating a makeshift flamethrower. The ghost shrieked and recoiled again, its spectral form flickering. They realized that the ghost was vulnerable to light and heat. They grabbed anything they could find, lamps, candles, anything that would burn, and used them as weapons. Bruce emerged from the darkness, his face pale with terror. "It's after me!" he screamed. He had led the ghost right to them. Don, who had been silent throughout the ordeal, suddenly moved. He grabbed a heavy wooden chair and charged at the ghost, smashing it against the spectral figure. The ghost shrieked and dissipated, only to reappear moments later, angrier than before. They fought through the night, a desperate battle against a relentless supernatural force. They used fire, light, and any weapon they could find to keep the ghost at bay. Chapter 5. Dawn's Bleak Light. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of gray and pale orange, the ghost began to weaken. Its form flickered erratically, its wails grew fainter. Finally, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the broken windows, the ghost let out a final agonizing shriek and vanished. Silence descended upon the house, broken only by their ragged breaths. They were alive, but they were broken. The events of the night had shattered their sense of reality, leaving them scarred and traumatized. They found the minivan started. They piled in, their faces pale, their eyes haunted. Dawn was silent as usual, staring out the window. They drove away from the Whispering Pines inheritance, leaving the horrors behind them. But they knew they would never truly escape. The ghost, the house, the terror, it would forever be etched into their memories, a chilling reminder of the night they faced the darkness and barely survived. They did not speak of it again, each content to try and heal from the shared trauma. But they all knew that the Whispering Pines estate hadn't seen the last of its visitors, and it preyed on their minds ever since.